अभी जो मैंने क्वेश्चन ये राइटिंग का है जो है अभी मैंने पढ़ा उर्दू में, ठीक है, आप इसको और से देख लीजिएगा। अब मेरी ये कोशिश है कि मैं इसको इंग्लिश में कम्युनिकेट करूं। असल में बेसिक बात यह है कि जब आप आइएलटीएस का इम्तहान देंगे तो जाहिर है आपने उसे इंग्लिश ही में देना है, उर्दू में नहीं देना। तो मेरा जो कहने का मकसद है, जो मैंने उर्दू में लेक्चर दिया है उसको आप देख लीजिएगा पहले, फिर आप इंग्लिश को देखिएगा तो काफ़ी इम्प्रूवमेंट बन जाएगी आपकी। तो नाउ लेट अस एनालाइज राइटिंग टास्क। जो क्वेश्चन मैंने डिस्कस किया है, इट इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट वगैरह वगैरह उर्दू में देख लीजिएगा। तो यानी बच्चों को सजा देनी चाहिए या नहीं देनी चाहिए। नाउ आई वुड लाइक टू कम्युनिकेट इन इंग्लिश। इज दैट क्लियर? You know, in this context, it's quite clear that if we want to develop human personality, if we want to develop the personality of our child, it must be the development of conscience. The first and foremost thing is that of the conscience. This is the role of both parent and that of the teachers, that they should try to develop conscience. Why they should try to give that of importance to conscience? Because conscience is a kind of instrument which is linked to the ability to tell from right to wrong. You know, conscience plays a significant role if we want to develop human personality, or if we want to develop human, that of the child. We should try to inculcate in the mind of a child conscience. When this is, I would like to say, is a kind of instrument. If this instrument is very powerful, then definitely he can differentiate between right and wrong. So the first message which I want to inculcate in the mind of children, that they should try to prop up conscience. Now come, that of a second thing. You know, it must be the first and foremost duty of that of the parent, a parent and teacher. In this context, it's quite clear that skill, craftsmanship, dexterity, cognitive skill comes with time and good parenting. We should try to, that way, develop, out of these kind of things in the mind of parents. And on top of that, these kind of things comes with time. And on top of that, parent can play a significant role to improve the skill, the craftsmanship, the dexterity, the cognitive skill and the craftsmanship and retentive memory, if parents come forward to help that of their children. Now there are two groups of that of children. There are two groups. One group is of the opinion that we should try to give physical punishment. The other group is trying to communicate that we shouldn't try to give that of physical punishment. In our country, in spite of the fact the government has stopped that of physical punishment, but even then some that have tried to give physical punishment. So I am deadly against that of a physical punishment, because if you try to give physical punishment to the children, definitely we cannot improve the skill, the craftsmanship and the experience of life of that of a child. When he grow old, a child whom we try to give physical punishment When he grow, he feels some, that of a lacking thing, or his personality becomes something difficult. So my firm conviction is that we shouldn't try to punish, that of a child. So far as this thing is concerned, I am totally disagree that the parent should, that the teacher should try to punish. So it must be the first and foremost role of, the parent, that they shouldn't try to punish both the parent and that of the children. Now comes, that is the second. As I am of the opinion, I am totally against, that of physical punishment. I am totally against, that of a harsh punishment. Because if you want to spoil your child, then definitely you will give punishment. So in this context, it's quite clear that the punishment depends upon the child's age. If you want to give punishment, not physical, I'm not in favor of physical punishment. If, for instance, you want to give physical punishment, that of the children, that is absolutely, I exclude, I dislike. So what kind of other punishment? That and on top of that depend upon the age of a child. For instance, if you try to punish the child in his small age, the child does not know why he is being punished. Now, for instance, you want to punish the child, you want to learn him lesson, but the child is so, that of a small, that he cannot differentiate that why he is being punished. So we should avoid, of these kind of things. Again, I'm of the opinion, as an infant, as a small child, will not understand what is happening with him, why he is or she is being punished. So it must be our first and foremost duty that we should try to avoid, that of these kind of things. If we punish, that of the child, then definitely we cannot achieve, that of the desired goal. Is that clear? So now, if I try to analyze, that of the Western countries, the European countries, over here there is no concept of physical punishment. There is no concept of, that of a physical punishment. It is because of the fact that they have realized when you are trying to punish the child, his all ability, his all, that of a craftsmanship will mar forever. So it must be our first and foremost duty that we should try to think on that perspective. And on top of that, our religion, Islam, does not allow physical punishment. Is that clear? So we should try to avoid, that of a giving punishment. Now comes, that of the next stage. And what is the next stage? Once the age of reason is reached, when a child is reached on the age of reason, then he can differentiate between, that of the right and wrong. Is that clear? A child cannot be rewarded. Now, in this context, it's quite clear. For instance, you want to give punishment. Is that clear? You want to punish, that of your child. No, punishment should be different. For instance, if your child do something better in education or in other walks of life or either in other things, you should try to give him reward. And if you feel that your child is not trying to good, that of in this perspective, then you can discourage, that of your child. So there are two things over here. When a child reach to an age when he can differentiate the, good and bad, or the age of reason. So in this context, there are two things. For instance, if your child does good, you can reward him. If your child does something wrong, you can discourage him, but you cannot punish him. So far as I am of the opinion that firm approach, positive approach, will definitely improve the child. So I am of the opinion that we should try to avoid that of the physical punishment. And in this context, both teacher and parent provide good role. Or in other words, I am of the opinion, children, बच्चे जो हैं, they try to copy their elders. And on top of that, children also try to copy their teachers. So if they come forward to play the role of good modeling, when they try to play a role of good modeling, okay, then definitely the children will try to copy parent and that of a teacher. So it must be the first and foremost duty that teacher should try to provide the role of modeling, okay, so that with the passage of time, the that of student may improve. For instance, if you say, if sanctions are needed, for instance, if you want to give that of a punishment, the punishment should be not that of a physical, but that is, you can skip over their privileges, you can skip over their pocket money, and you can create a detention for a child. So if you want to, for instance, if you want to punish your child, you should try to stop their privilege, his pocket money, and on top of that, you may try to make a kind of detention and time out. But physical punishment cannot prove that of a good result. So I am of the opinion, my dear boys and girls, that physical punishment is not good for the future prospect of children. So we should try to avoid it. So we have discussed that of a writing task. Now the next time we will try to discuss that of the rest of the others.